It's the start of 2018. The Washington State Cougars are set to kick things off against the Wyoming Cowboys. It has been maybe one of the darkest off seasons behind one of the worst decades of Cougar football in a long time. They had started to turn the corner, but had yet to truly achieve greatness under new head coach Mike Leach. But what they weren't expecting was what they were about to see from their senior graduate transfer quarterback, Gardner Minshew. And that was one of the greatest seasons in Washington State history, and the season of Minshew Mania. Okay, if you're like me, you love collecting things. I mean, from Magic to Pokemon to Yu-Gi-Oh, I've pretty much collected it all. And there is no better feeling than right before you crack a pack and the possibilities are endless. And if you miss that feeling as much as I have, then I have got the sponsor for you. It's Arena Club. Arena Club is a website that's going to let you relive a little bit of that childhood joy with their slab packs that let you open high-value slab cards right on the spot. They have a super transparent listing so you know exactly what you can pull, which gives you peace of mind that you're going to get some value out of your packs. And the best part is, if you get something you're not interested in, they're going to give you an offer on the spot to buy it back so you can go again. On top of that, you can go to their digital showroom to auction, sell, and even retrieve your physical cards all on their website. And I've had a blast ripping gem mints on Arena Club, and I think you're going to as well. So much so that if you go right now, you can get 20% off a slab pack. You heard me right, 20% off. If you've collected cards long enough, you know that discounts like that do not come very often, so I suggest going right now. arenaclub.com/punts to get 20% off. Have fun, relive some of your childhood, thank me later. Now, there are a lot of places I'm sure a lot of Coug fans want me to start the story at. Probably somewhere in like that early 90s range, the era of the great quarterbacks and the highs of the Cougar Nation. But I can only speak from my own experience, so I'm going to start the story right where I achieved consciousness, somewhere around the mid-2000s. And for those Cougs fans rolling their eyes, we'll get back to the past in a bit, so don't worry about that right now. But by the time I truly achieved consciousness and could remember stuff like football games, the Cougars were on a bit of a downtrend to say the least. You see, after many great years with head coach Mike Price, where he had taken the Cougars to extraordinary heights, he was quickly picked off by the SEC powerhouse you may know as Alabama. And though he would never coach a single game for them due to being literally too cool for Tuscaloosa, the Cougars were looking to keep the momentum going with Bill Doba, who would not have an easy go at it. He would come in and keep the momentum high, but have tragedy strike him as his wife would develop ovarian cancer in his first year, and it was clear that this was affecting him as it should affect anyone. The game started to slip away, and he began to lose grip on the program as a whole because of it. So after a promising first year, by the end of 2007, he was barely above 500 total as a coach, with many rough seasons just behind him and the loss of his wife in 2006, he felt it was time to move on, resigning from that job and ultimately retiring altogether, which opened the door for probably the most infamous coach in Washington State history, Paul Wulff. But you see, I'm actually going to be a little bit more fair to Paul than I think most Cougs were. Now, did he come in with just a terrible attitude and claim that the Cougs were void of talent? Yes. Did he have one of the worst records of all time, not just for Washington State coaches, but in like coaching history? Also, yes. But the thing is, even behind the middle of the pack success that the previous coaching staff had, there were some serious problems brewing under the surface for the Washington State Cougars. So as I alluded to earlier, the program had fallen into complete disarray. Players were failing out of classes, retention rates were incredibly low for the Coug team. We had already known things had gotten bad for the most part, but Paul Wulff was hamstrung not just by any perceived lack of talent and prejudice against his own players, but also in no short part to his own players not being available due to getting arrested, failing out of school, or the sanctions that were placed on Washington State due to the NCAA getting a whiff of everything going on. So yeah, he flubbed his interviews. He didn't come up in big moments. He posted a 9-40 record, made all Cougars fans depressed, and was pretty much solely responsible for many awkward silent drives on Sunday morning heading to church because my dad, who was visibly distraught, stayed up and watched whatever disaster happened on the field the night before. But the part nobody really talks about is how many people probably weren't going to succeed in that spot. And the one bright spot that we can take away from all of this is that the behind behind the scenes aspects were slowly but surely being turned around in a trial by fire mindset brought on by Wulff. But still, the record was beyond unacceptable, which means that in 2011 they had to part ways with him, even though things were appearing to somewhat be slightly turning around, which arguably set up the blank slate of a program to be taken over by Mike Leach. Now, if you want a whole bio on Mike, I have a video, so I'll link that below, but I'll just say he's known for turning programs around and giving schools like Washington State the grease they need for their wheels to be churning. So everyone was pretty damn excited to have him on board. That being said, it did not start out too smooth. The first year he would go 3-9, and he was looking to find his starting quarterback when he would land on Connor Halliday. They would then put together a 6-6 season and go bowling in Halliday's breakout year before the following season coming back and having another disappointing year, with Connor getting injured and us being introduced to Luke Falk, who would finish that season and start the new true age of Washington State football. From here, they were in the gutters of the Pac-12 no longer. Falk would come in and take this offense to a completely new gear. They were competitive, gave us some marquee wins over Oregon and UCLA, and even our losses were incredibly competitive, like against an FCS team. Okay, we're going to ignore that. But our 2 losses to ranked teams were to a top 20 Cal by just 6 points and a top 10 Stanford on a missed 43 game-winning field goal. Also, no, I'm not going to talk about any Apple Cups from here, so UW fans, you can eat my But from here on out, the Cougars were going to be regulars in the top 25 polls. The next season, despite opening once again with a loss to an FCS team, which is just so, what the hell, man, they would demolish a top 25 Stanford, beat Oregon again, and they weren't ranked, but man, it's still satisfying, before losing by 14 to a good Colorado team, and got a chance to go bowling again as fans were learning to love seeing Falk at the helm. But coming into 2017, Falk was going to up the ante like no other, most notably with a thriller of a game over a top 5 USC team with Sam Darnold at the helm, and just an outstanding performance by Falk, and then beating Oregon by 23 points. I know, they weren't ranked, I still don't care. And then they would take on Stanford and in a show of guts and glory, playing through an injured wrist, would duke it out and win. But with this being Falk's final year, people were looking to get a glimpse at what would come next. So yes, Falk and Leach were a good combination to keep Washington State in the upper quarter of FBS teams. The problem was that they seldom finished the job there. As you may have figured out, they still hadn't beat the Huskies since Leach's first Apple Cup.
Snap, place, kicked, on its way, it is gone! Now that's funny! The second time!
And while they were often making appearances in the top 25 list, they never really ended a season there, and only had one bowl win to show for it on top of it all. That came from Connor Halliday. But the guy looking to come in and help continue this momentum was a young kid by the name of Tyler Helinski, who was showing some serious promise. He came in late against Boise State to help lead a 21-point comeback. He was throwing the ball well. He had a few struggles against Arizona where, despite coming in late in the second half, threw for 509 yards. He did end 4 of those drives in interceptions, but for him coming in unexpected, many Coug fans are probably willing to see that as water under the bridge, and even more so as in his bowl game performance, he was just as solid as you could hope from a guy starting his first game against a top 25 team. I mean, Michigan State capitalized on Washington State's slow start, so in the first 7 drives, they had 5 touchdowns, pretty much sealing this game long before the final whistle blew. But after about 2 weeks, Helinski would tragically take his own life after a battle with depression. This would absolutely rock the world of Washington State Cougar fans who were not only learning to just appreciate who Helinski was as a quarterback, but also looking forward to a lot of what he was going to do on the field for them later, as this was easily one of the darkest times for those in the Crimson and Gray. But that being said, even through the tragedy, they still needed to play and they needed to find a new quarterback. But in Leach's time there, his starters, while all having their moments to shine, I think it's pretty safe to say, were just pretty good. Sure, they'd make some smart plays from time to time, they weren't incredibly risky with the ball, but both Halliday and Falk weren't exactly super mobile quarterbacks and just let Leach open the playbook for them. And this is the famed Wazoo, home of some of the great college quarterbacks like the throw-in Samoan, Drew Bledsoe, heck, even Ryan Leaf, known for his extraordinary fall from the NFL, but hey, you can't fall from rock bottom, and that man was at the top of the world his last year in Pullman. So who did the evil genius bring in? A backup quarterback out of East Carolina. Are you kidding me? I mean, this guy wasn't good enough to play at Troy, went the JUCO route before transferring to ECU, and couldn't even be their starter in 2016 before splitting reps at starter in 2017. And this is the guy that Mike Leach was giving the keys to the kingdom to? So now that you've caught up with all the heartbreak, we're once again back to the start of 2018. So when the Cougs took the field against Wyoming, holy hell did he give these Cowboys one heck of a ride. The first half, they had the Cougars' number. Well, the Cougars had their Cougs' number. We had to do all but walk the ball into the end zone for them as we gave it away in every conceivable fashion. Fumble, safety on a punt, interceptions. So when the half closed, Wyoming probably felt that they were in a pretty good spot as they led 16-13. This would drag into the third as fans across the country were worried about the Cougs couging it once again against what they deemed a lesser opponent until the fourth quarter came, and with it brought 3 completely unanswered touchdowns, leaving the Cowboys in the dust and bringing in the start of Minshew Mania. The following week, there'd be no such pleasantries of trying to keep it close against San Jose State, as the only thing that kept this game remotely close were a pair of picks in the first half, which was dwarfed by the 24-0 score. But what fans were finally seeing is that we weren't just winning games, we were truly dominating them. And the man at the helm was unstoppable. He wasn't just moving in the pocket, he's fluid, he's making guys miss, throwing on the run, and dare I say, looking like he's having fun doing it. And though their toughest opponents were still ahead of them, it didn't mean that they were going to enjoy slaughtering the Eastern Washington Eagles any less, who embarrassed us not too long ago, as Minshew dropped 470 yards of passing on their head and making dang near no mistakes, as he also had an 80% completion percentage across nearly 60 throws. And this wouldn't slow down into week 4 when taking on Southern California, who was sneakily good, as Minshew was continuing to churn through the team, throwing for 344 yards and 3 touchdowns and leading what should have been a game-tying field goal drive if it were not blocked, making this the 4th game-tying or winning field goal that I've had to go over in this video. But finally, after getting a taste of defeat as a Cougar, he wanted no more. Utah, who would hold 6 separate teams to 10 or less points this year, would come to Pullman to face a pissed-off Minshew, and he would tear them to shreds. Drive after drive in the first half, they would exchange touchdowns. Minshew was just not flinching against a defense that was literally swarmed with NFL talent, which is a great time to bring up that talent discrepancy. Now, this is the Cougs, and they're an FBS team, so of course, they've got some players, but against pretty much any other team, they had nearly none of the star power. Minshew was throwing to receivers like Easop Winston, Desmond Patton, Kyle Sweet, and if you're already struggling to recognize any of these names, it's because outside of this one year, very few of them went on to do much more with their careers. And these guys were shredding the defense of teams like Utah, who had 9 future NFL players starting on defense that year. But after the game was tied at half, Utah took the lead with a field goal, and then the game stalled. People began to doubt, are we ever going to be able to move the ball again? That defense was starting to look like everything it cracked up to be. But with 6 minutes left in the game, things were looking more grim as the Utes' future NFL punter, Mitch Wishnowsky, shot out a dagger, forcing the fair catch at the 7-yard line. But after a quick dump pass, Minshew knew what had to happen. He steps back, makes his one read, likes it, and finds Winston on the go route, who then makes a man miss, cuts once, cuts back again, and it's a foot race. The Utes were couging it. And not just that, but when they were driving down the field, their one saving grace of that drive on a 4th and 10 would find a receiver 37 yards down the field, but have it called back for a holding penalty, which the ensuing play would have no such luck, advancing the Cougars not only to 4-1, but a much needed step closer to being ranked, where Oregon State would usher them to that ranking as they would put up a considerably smaller fight. You see, they would make the mistake of trying to purely race the Cougs, but Minshew and crew would just go berserk. I mean, he threw for 430 yards and 5 touchdowns in spectacular fashion, making some of the most crazy pinpoint accurate throws you have ever seen. He was fitting balls into windows you didn't think existed, and while Oregon State was able to keep up for the first half, when that second half came, the high-octane Cougar offense just peeled away as the relentless onslaught continued, ending the game 56-37 and turning their eyes to the Beavers' big brother as the Oregon was about to come to Pullman. And now, facing down their toughest challenge, a number 12 ranked Duck team, they would make light work of them. The first half would be as clean as you could ask. One interception deep in Oregon territory kept it from being a total slaughtering, as the next 4 Coug drives resulted in 4 Coug touchdowns, as Minshew threw for almost 300 yards in that half alone, pulling ahead 27-0. And the following half, despite Oregon's best efforts, they would come up short with a late Minshew touchdown, driving the dagger in a dominating 14-point victory over a top 15 teams, which moved the Cougars to number 14 in the AP polls, where notoriously this is where things would start to go downhill. So when facing a top 25 Stanford team, to many's dismay but few surprise, things were beginning to collapse. Stanford had found a way to keep the Cougs offense at bay in the first half, and despite an impressive 45-second drive by Minshew to get a field goal, the Cougs had a 2-score deficit to make up in the second half, trailing 17-28. But in that game that probably defined Minshew's career in Pullman, in the second half, he would do the opposite of Couging. He would drive the length of the field and get the ball in the box, not create any costly turnovers, and at the start of the fourth, lead a methodical touchdown drive, see his defense get a huge stop, and lead one more to take a 7-point lead before Stanford would tie it up with a little over a minute again, where on 3rd and 2 of the following drive, Minshew would throw maybe one of the best passes of his career. An absolute strike over the middle, 35 yards to set, oh god, no, not a game-winning field goal, the bane of Cougars' existence for the last decade, but Minshew's presence broke all the Cougar curses as Blake Mazza drilled it for the win and advanced to 7-1, as now, across the nation, Minshew Mania was taking over. Mustaches were beginning to be seen in crowds, cutouts of Minshew's head as well were popping up as the boy from the deep south was taking over the Pacific Northwest. And it wasn't going to end here. Cal would present a defensive dogfight that no one was expecting, especially after their mile-high shootout from a couple years back, which Minshew, of course, would be the one to finally put the dagger in the heart of the bear before Colorado would fall, as Garner would sling it for 335 yards and a pair of touchdowns before being sat late in the fourth to give the backups some reps, as poor Arizona would appear to be on the receiving end of a stat padding, as Minshew would throw for 470 yards and 7 touchdowns as they proved who their real cats were, at the highest ranking in over a decade since Mike Price left them with a Rose Bowl appearance. They now had to take on the Huskies, and finally, after all this, they collapsed. This was a bad game, but Leach and his time at Pullman had only won the Apple Cup once and always seemed to have problems with this game, which sucks because outside of that, he was a Coug legend.
Inside the Rodgers, option, pitch, didn't get it.
This never gets old.
But now at 10-2, they wanted to end the season strong. So against Iowa State, featuring the now famous Brock Purdy, it resulted in Minshew putting the cherry on top of a great season. He won the bowl game with the help of a big stuff on a 2-point conversion to tie it late in the fourth quarter, where it wasn't just a win, but sealed Washington State's winningest season of all time, their highest ranking in the last decade and a half. And after all the turmoil and all the tragedy and downright heartbreaking games and losing coaches and players that the Cougar faithful had endured for decades straight, it all culminated in one damn good year. A year that will never be forgotten, known as Minshew Mania.
And the fans rush the field. It's a storm of crimson.